Hey, welcome back or welcome. It's Jen here. So I get a lot of questions and requests that ask, how do we take all the information around color analysis, body types, essences, facial proportions, all of that? How do we take all that information and incorporate the pieces together in defining our own style? And I agree that there really is an overwhelming amount of information out there and countless rabbit holes that we can easily dig ourselves into. But I also believe that there is some sort of a logical process or steps that we can take somewhat sequentially in navigating through all of this information in a more cohesive and organized manner. And after months and months of pondering on this topic, I think I'm finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Like I'm just starting to be able to explain this entire process in a simple enough way, but also in a way that's not too restrictive or limiting. So today I'm going to try to chip away at the tip of the iceberg by introducing the beginning stages of the roadmap in defining our personal style if we were to start from ground zero. So a lot of these different style systems out there have a tendency to focus mostly on one area of the physical appearance. The face, for example, concepts like facial proportions or Kitchener essences mostly focus on the face. Color analysis also focuses on the face, but it's more so on the coloring rather than on the individual features because we're looking at the natural colors and the contrast level that we're born with in figuring out our best colors. So in that sense, the overall coloring can also be an area of focus. And then we also have the body. So any type of body typing systems like fruit shapes or even kibi, which I know is a bit of a controversial comment because kibi is technically an essence-based system. But I think how a lot of people use kibi these days is by looking mostly at the body and understanding the lines of our body in order to figure out our best silhouettes. Now, if we had to rank these different areas of focus in terms of importance in defining our personal style, I would say the face comes first, and then the body type, and then the coloring. I think the general contrast level is still important, like the contrast between the hair and the skin and the eyes, because it kind of relates to the overall impression of the face. But when I say coloring comes last in priority, what I'm referring to is color analysis. So the specific process of figuring out our color season and our best colors. I'm saying that that comes in last in terms of priority. And the reason why I say that is because of color psychology, as well as some practical challenges that are created by color psychology. To elaborate on that point a little bit more, I created a 9-episode series on color analysis deep dives earlier this year, and a big part of that series was related to color psychology. So how our minds associate certain colors or color groups to specific images or emotions. True spring colors, for example, come across as vibrant, youthful, and energetic, whereas deep winter colors come across as more grounded, heavier, sophisticated, and they're often associated with ideas like power or strength. And color analysis is based on the overall coloring and the contrast level that we're born with. So it's an objective way of figuring out what our best colors are based on what we naturally have. But when there's color psychology involved, I think that looking at colors objectively becomes a lot more difficult because what if the overall impression of my facial features doesn't match the emotions that are typically associated with my color season? I think that a good example is Kate Blanchett. I know she's well known for having an ethereal essence and an overall softness to her look, but if we leave coloring aside and just focus on Kate's face from a proportions, lines, shapes, and angle perspective, her facial features actually add quite a bit of sharpness and masculinity. She's got these horizontally long eyes, she has a little bit of width in her nose bridge. The overall shape of the nose is on the softer side, but there is definitely some prominence there in terms of width. And she has some angularity in her bone structure as well, both in the cheekbones and the jawline. And the shape of her lips are also on the straight side. Just to be clear, when I say certain features appear more masculine, it doesn't mean a bad thing. I have an older video on the topic of facial gender where we talk about the different facial traits that make a face appear more feminine or masculine, and both sides can be equally striking. Okay, so when I use the term masculinity, I'm not using any kind of a negative undertone there. But on a related note, since the facial gender video is somewhat outdated, if you guys want a new refresher video on the topic, definitely let me know in the comments. traits. And then if we look at Kate's face from a facial age perspective, and again, I have another video on mature versus youthful facial traits if you're interested. I think that Kate's face definitely leans more mature than youthful, right? She kind of has a long face, a slightly long nose tip, pretty taut cheeks, and overall there's more visual weight found in her lower face, so naturally the vertical lines of her face become a little more highlighted. So if we were to leave coloring aside completely, Kate Blanchett's facial impression based on the lines, the shapes, angles, and proportions, they lean more masculine than feminine and more mature than youthful. What adds that softness and that ethereal vibe to Kate Blanchett's overall look is really her overall coloring. You know, all that drama in her facial features is subdued and softened because her color season, which I think most people can agree to, is light summer. And if we think about the emotions that are typically associated with the light summer palette, they're very delicate and feminine, right? So Kate Blanchett has this really interesting face where there's opposing images that coexist. Her facial features are a little more dramatic, whereas her overall coloring is very soft and feminine. Now here's what I mean by the overall impression of the facial features taking a bigger importance than the overall coloring. If we look at Kate wearing this very feminine, soft dress, and the colors are all within her color season, so this is a style that disregards the sort of the sharper side of Kate's facial features and her overall impression. If we compare this outfit to Kate wearing this pantsuit combo, but the colors are completely outside of her color season, in my opinion, if I had to pick one over the other, I would choose the suit because I think it does a better job at bringing out a more unique vibe that Kate Blanchett has. You know, she has this mature and sophisticated look to her, and she looks really refined, yet there's a level of edginess to her look, which the pantsuit does a better job at bringing out. The dress, there's nothing wrong with it, but I just don't think it's really doing her anything either. You know, it just makes her look like she's a very well taken care of person, period. Maybe this is just a personal preference thing. You know, some of you might think that the more feminine and soft style of dress in the light summer colors is better for her. But I think it's no coincidence that we're seeing more and more of Kate rocking these pantsuits. You know, she's kind of sticking to the same silhouette, but incorporating more light summer colors in her more recent outfits. And I think this is sort of a happy medium where she gets the best of both worlds. Now, here's where the practical challenges associated with color psychology comes in. Kate Blanchett can get a variety of pantsuits in her light summer colors because she's a celebrity. She has all the resources to have somebody shop for these. She can obviously pay for them regardless of the price tag, and she can probably even get somebody to design her a pantsuit in every single light summer color if she wanted to. But that's not really feasible for mere ordinary people like us. You know, items we come across within our color season are more often than not found in certain styles, like how soft autumn colors are often found in boho styles of clothing, and how light, clear pastels and light summer colors are more often found in delicate and feminine styles of clothing. It's not that it's completely impossible to find the right styles of items in the right colors, but we just need to look a lot harder for them because of these stereotypes that are associated with certain colors. And then on top of that, to make matters even more complicated, if we have to take into consideration the affordability aspect of it, the sustainability or the environmental friendliness of the garment, the quality of the fabric, etc., all these factors combined make it extremely difficult for us to find items that fit all of our needs and wants 100%. And that, like I mentioned in my last video, puts us in this analysis paralysis mode because there's an overload of information and so many criteria that we're told to consider. And I think this is why prioritizing the different areas of focus when it comes to our physical appearance is important. If we don't have a general understanding of our overall impression and what kind of styles suit that impression, without having that general guideline, knowing our best colors alone is not all that helpful in narrowing narrowing down the styles that look harmonious on us. And I think things like figuring out our exact color season or our best of best silhouettes, those are kind of like the cherry on top of an already realized style. But in order for us to be able to place that cherry on top, we need a really good foundation to begin with. And that foundation comes from having an understanding of the overall impression of our features, and that usually starts with the face. Okay, so the next question naturally becomes, how do we then go about understanding the overall impression of the face? Just like how we use Kate Blanchett as an example, we can look at the masculine versus feminine traits of the face and youthful versus mature traits of the face. We can use those two as sort of the main two broad criteria to create a chart with 4 quadrants. There's a few systems out there that use this sort of quadrant mapping, and I want to give proper credit to them. So there's the Style Key system from Style Thoughts by Rita, and that system uses the left and right essences and the up and down styles, which is kind of like how extravagant or understated your preferences are. So this system is less about the physical appearance, but more about your own preferences as well as the overall energy of the person. And then there's also some Asian beauty consulting businesses that I came across that use sharp versus soft and child versus adult axes to categorize all of the faces into 4 types. So based on this system, Kate Blanchett would technically belong to the cool type. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of categorization systems. I know that we as humans just want more certainty and answers, but once there's categories involved, I think we get too fixated on typing ourselves, and that can usually box us in and create some limitations. So systems like color analysis or Kibi, like once we know that we have to belong to one category, then we get fixated on trying to figure out what that category is instead of trying to understand why. I also think it's impossible to group everyone's face into just 4 types. I think that's too broad of a generalization, but I do think it's beneficial to understand whereabouts on the spectrum of these axes or quadrants my facial impression would fall into. I think that can give us some guidance on how to explore styles along these spectrums. So very broadly, how I would categorize the different style elements based on these criteria is like this. With masculine versus feminine, we can look at how boxy or form-fitting the clothes are. In terms of the lines, we can look at how straight or curved the lines or the silhouettes are. And also kind of related to that, we can look at whether the garments are more structured and rigid or less structured and more flowy and fluid. When it comes to youthful versus mature, we can look at how casual versus formal or tailored the clothing is. In terms of length, we can look at how short or long the garments are. And then pattern-wise, youthful styles are playful and busier, whereas mature styles are more subdued and simpler. And youthful styles are also more trend-based, whereas mature styles are more classic and timeless. Now, if we were to visualize these styles in a very crudely simple way, I would say the top left quadrant is masculine and youthful, right? So more of a tomboyish style. It's very casual, sort of streetwear type of clothes. And then the top right quadrant is feminine and youthful. So they're more girly styles with a lot of ornate details, quite delicate, sweet, and innocent vibes. And then the bottom left is masculine and mature. So they're not boyish, but more so like a grown-up style. So more formal, the pantsuits, sort of how we talked about with Kate Blanchett example, more straight lines and definitely more structure. And then the bottom right is feminine and mature. So they're quite polished, formal and fitted, tailored, classic, etc. Okay, I know that's a very crude generalization, but I think it paints a pretty decent mental picture of what the extremes of each quadrant would look like in terms of style. And using a spectrum mindset instead of a black and white mindset, we can look at it as how our most suitable style would depend on where exactly on the spectrum our overall impression would sit. If we use Kate Blanchett as an example again, she falls into the masculine and mature quadrant. So if she wanted to lean more into feminine styles, she can maybe keep an overall mature styling, but add more form-fitting silhouette or use softer details in the blouse, or wear a longer skirt instead of pants. And then for more casual styles, she can maybe change up the texture of the pantsuit to denim so it feels more casual. She can change the shoes to add a more relaxed feel to the outfit, or she can use more trendy accessories. And it's really interesting how we can see as she pushes her boundaries further and further, the styles start to look more and more dissonant from her. If we use myself as an example, I've talked about it before that my face is more mature leaning. And in terms of features and masculine versus feminine, I think I have a mix of both. I have like a little round nose, pretty full lips, but the outline of the lips is more on the straight side. My eyes have a little sharpness. I have a bit of width in my facial structure. My contrast is also sort of like medium high. I have very thick hair strands. They're quite coarse and dark. Some of you know that I lighten my eyebrows with makeup on purpose to soften the overall look, but naturally my eyebrows are quite dark. So if I were to place myself on this chart, I would definitely fall somewhere along the bottom and probably slightly more to the left or the masculine side. So if I wanted to explore more feminine styles, I should look for inspiration in the bottom right quadrant instead of the upper right quadrant, which is the very girly and delicate styles. And that totally explains why those are my worst silhouettes and the styles that I naturally just gravitate away from. And then if I wanted to explore more youthful styles, I can look at casual, but maybe stick to more tomboyish styles than the super girly and delicate styles. And with the casual styles, I would probably still want to keep some level of maturity. So I would keep the colors pretty simple and subdued, or only use pops of colors in certain small areas of the outfit, and try to avoid busy patterns or anything too loud. And then if I wanted to explore the more feminine styles, like I said, I would probably want to keep the overall style pretty mature, maybe use a mix of boxy and fitted items. I might want to style my hair a little bit differently depending on the outfit to sort of offset coming across as too masculine or too feminine, etc. So I think this is a good way to find an anchor for where my comfort zone is going to be. Depending on where exactly on the spectrum my overall impression sits, I know that styles sort of in that area are going to look good on me because everything is working together and harmoniously with my appearance. And then if I wanted to explore outside of that, knowing whereabouts my anchor sits can help provide some guidance around how far I can push towards the other sides of the spectrum. I came across another content creator that uses this quadrant map, and she actually comes up with catchphrases of her own to create outfits based on these 4 quadrants. And I thought it was a good way to define what does casual and masculine mean for me, or how much youthful and feminine styles can I push my boundaries to? Because those words can mean different things for different people. And I also think it's a way to sort of incorporate our own preferences without feeling too limited or boxed into a single category. Like if I sit on the masculine and mature side, but if I'm super drawn to feminine and youthful styles, then how can I incorporate those elements in a natural enough way that makes sense for my overall impression, and that's not going to make me look like I'm wearing a costume. Also remember that understanding the overall impression means not only looking at the lines, the shapes, the proportions of the face, but also understanding the overall vibe of the person. Like, what's your personality like? What is your voice like? What are your mannerisms? Maybe you have a very youthful looking face, but you have a calm and mature personality. Or maybe you have a very hyper feminine look to you, but your voice is quite deep and raspy, and that completely changes the overall vibe of the person. In that sense, thinking about how others would describe you can also be helpful. We have a difficult time being objective with ourselves, and it gets complicated pretty quickly, but other people can usually describe us in a few words, right? It's not as complicated. Just remember that we're not still pictures, so how we actually come across as in person would be important. Also, thinking about the time, place, and occasion can be helpful. Like if you're going to work, or if it's your first time meeting someone, or if you're attending a formal event, you would dress a little bit differently than how you would when you're hanging out with friends and family or in more casual settings. So I think thinking about your environment can also be a good way to sort of come up with different ideas to explore your style for each of the quadrants. I found it really interesting how this quadrant system naturally explains some of the theories behind systems like Kibbe or Kitchener. Like if you lean youthful and feminine, you probably have some level of ingenue essence, or if you're more youthful and masculine, you probably have some level of gamine essence in you, etc. I just think that having two main criteria is just easier, and it's more of a practical approach because it's simpler. So once we have a general understanding of the overall style and whereabouts on the spectrum we would fall into, then we can start deep diving into body types and silhouettes and color analysis as ways to fine-tune our style more. Going back to Kate Blanchett as an example, she's incorporating her best colors to the silhouettes that she already feels really good in. And even if we don't have as much resources, I think this is still a really good place to start your personal style journey if you feel completely lost in defining what your own style is like, or if you're just unsure where to begin. Like I said, this is just a bit of an intro, and I'm still processing a lot of this information and learning how to fine-tune everything, but I thought this was a simple enough start that I could share with everybody so you guys can give it a try, and it's a chance for us to understand ourselves a little bit more in defining our own styles. I hope you found the video helpful. If you did, don't forget to press the like, subscribe, and notification buttons before you go, and I'll see you in my next video. Until then, stay unique and stay gorgeous.